They're trying to somehow tie President Trump to the scandal. President Trump has nothing to do with it. He has said himself he has nothing to hide. And that's clearly what they've been trying to do. They're trying to attack President Trump. This is what they've done. They weaponized the justice system over the last several years to go after him, and this is their latest attempt.
Oh, Mike Johnson, because your own words are now coming back to haunt you. And this time, there's no spin strong enough to hold them together. What we are witnessing right now is not a misunderstanding. It is not a media exaggeration. It is a public official walking himself into a corner on live television, in recorded interviews, and in official congressional arguments, all while trying to explain why the Epstein files should not fully see the light of day. Let's slow this down and go piece by piece, because this matters. For months, Johnson has insisted that he supports transparency. He's said it repeatedly on Fox, on Meet the Press, in hallway interviews. The phrase is always the same: I support releasing all credible information. That sounds responsible. That sounds reasonable, until you realize that the word credible is doing all the work. Because once you insert that word, transparency is no longer transparency. It becomes permission-based disclosure. Someone decides what you're allowed to see, and that someone just happens to be the same political leadership now under scrutiny. Now let's talk about how this blew open. When reporters repeatedly asked Johnson about the Epstein files, his reaction wasn't calm explanation. It was irritation, frustration, dismissal. He repeatedly framed the questions as political attacks, not as legitimate demands for accountability in a child sex trafficking case. That alone raised alarms. But then Johnson crossed a line, and he did it himself. On national television, Johnson suggested that Donald Trump may have cooperated with federal law enforcement against Jeffrey Epstein. He didn't just say Trump distanced himself. He went further. He used language associated with confidential informants. Those were not throwaway words. Those were deliberate words. And the moment they left his mouth, the narrative changed. Because if Trump was helping law enforcement, then suddenly the entire Epstein timeline shifts. Suddenly Trump isn't adjacent to Epstein. He's positioned as part of the solution. But here's the problem. There is no official record confirming Trump was a confidential informant. There is no documentation, no court filing, no DOJ confirmation, nothing. And within 24 hours, Johnson panicked and walked it back. Now it was taken out of context. Now it was terminology I shouldn't have used. Now it was common knowledge, even though he admitted he had no direct knowledge. That's not clarification. That's damage control. And when a Speaker of the House starts revising his own statements overnight, people pay attention. Now let's move to the obstruction itself. Johnson aggressively opposed the discharge petition that would have forced the DOJ to release Epstein-related material. His justification that releasing the files could create new victims. But listen carefully to who he was talking about. Not the trafficked minors, not the girls who were abused, not the survivors who've waited years for justice. He was talking about wealthy men, politicians, business figures, people whose names might appear in the files. That argument is stunning. Johnson explicitly framed potential reputational harm to powerful men as a reason to keep information sealed. In other words, the concern wasn't justice. It was embarrassment. That's not how criminal accountability works. And when pressed on why the DOJ couldn't simply redact irrelevant names, something it already does, Johnson offered no clear answer. Instead, he repeated the same phrase: we must protect innocent people. Innocent people, apparently, does not include the victims. Then came the national security excuse. Johnson claimed that releasing Epstein files could jeopardize national security and compromise intelligence operations. That's a serious claim, but once again, there were no specifics, no explanation of how, no examples, just fear-based language. At the same time, and this is key, Johnson repeatedly insisted that Trump had nothing to do with Epstein and had nothing to hide. Those two statements cannot coexist. If there's nothing to hide, transparency strengthens trust. If transparency threatens national security, then something sensitive is being protected. And it's not the victims. Now, let's address the birthday letter. A letter attributed to Trump surfaced, reportedly written for Epstein's 50th birthday. Handwriting analysis, formatting, and context all matched Trump's known style. Johnson was asked a simple question: do you believe this letter is real? His answer was immediate. I don't. Not we're investigating. Not we need forensic review. Just denial. And when asked why he didn't believe it, the implication was clear. Trump told him it wasn't real. That's not evidence. That's loyalty. And it gets worse. Johnson didn't just deny the letter. He dismissed it outright, while simultaneously claiming he supports transparency. You cannot support transparency while rejecting evidence without review. Those positions cancel each other out. Meanwhile, conservative media figures close to Johnson went on air telling Republicans to stop talking about Epstein entirely, not to refute the claims, not to disprove the evidence, just to move on. We can't waste time on this, they said. That is not the behavior of people confident in the truth. That is the behavior of people trying to run out the clock. Then came Johnson's appearance on Meet the Press. Once again, the same pattern. Yes, release the files, but only credible ones. Yes, transparency, but filtered. Yes, justice, but controlled. He even argued that grand jury materials should remain sealed, ignoring the fact that redacted releases are routine and legal when public interest demands it. At every turn, Johnson positioned himself not as a neutral arbiter of justice, but as a gatekeeper deciding how much truth the public can handle. That's not leadership. That's obstruction. Let's be clear about what this is really about. The Epstein case is not a mystery anymore. Epstein trafficked minors. He was protected. He received sweetheart deals. He operated in plain sight. The unanswered question is not what happened. It's who was protected. And every time Johnson speaks, that question gets louder because his words don't align. His explanations shift. His justifications collapse under scrutiny. This isn't about politics. It's about accountability. When powerful people argue that transparency itself is dangerous, it tells you exactly who they fear accountability for. The American people are not asking for rumors. They are asking for records. They are not asking for speculation. They are asking for consistency. And right now, Mike Johnson is failing that test. This story is not fading. It's accelerating because contradictions don't disappear, they compound. And once the record exists, it cannot be erased. If you want real news, real breakdowns, and coverage that follows the evidence instead of protecting power, subscribe to Future Geniuses. We don't do slogans. We do receipts. This is Future Geniuses. This is Future Geniuses.